Hi, friends. Welcome back to the You and Me podcast. My name is Carolina, and what a week it has been. So, if you listen to the previous episode, I feel like it was very chatty and it was me just celebrating the new beginning, a new beginning of my birthday, entering a new decade, the big 3-0, celebrating the end of a job and the beginning of a new job for both myself and my partner, celebrating this season of spring entering our lives. And here in the Pacific Northwest, once winter is gone, you see the sun and you feel so much more alive. So that celebration, we, as in me, decided that there was no better theme but a strawberry party, which, if you're watching the video, those are leftover strawberry decorations. And so we had our party last week, and I want to start off by saying, wow. Thank you to everybody who came through. Thank you to everybody that was so kind and respectful to our house. And we probably had around 40 people in the space. I think that we've really mastered having a layout that is not only conducive to inviting open conversation or being comfortable or having a dance party, but a space that also keeps the traffic and the flow of the house not turning into just a complete disaster. And the next day we did clean up and we had our space reset within an hour and a half. And that was to all the people who came over and helped pick up trash or helped clean the kitchen before they left. And also to everybody who was so in the theme and wore red or something affiliated to strawberries or brought food. It was incredible. And I want to just say that throwing parties is so much more than, getting effed up and losing your mind and forgetting the night. Like, I think that's kind of the stereotypical idea of what a party is. And I think that for me, a party is a celebration and bringing in your community and your neighbors and your friends and your family. And it's a time for everybody to gather and you get to meet new people and you get to talk about maybe the stressors that are happening in your life or the joys that are happening. And it's a time where you get to gain feedback and you get to gain more wisdom. It's also a time that you just get to have fun. Like, forget the demands of life and everything that we have to do and just go on the dance floor and shake and laugh. And it's also maybe a time that you haven't seen people in a while and it's a time to reconnect and make future plans. And I just find gatherings and parties to be so incredibly nourishing to the soul. And although they sometimes can be quite stressful when you're giving your beautiful house open doors to all these people, it ultimately is something that I just see myself doing for so long, just opening my doors, because it truly is magnificent and I'm just so grateful for it. But beyond the gratitude, I want to get real. So this was the first week of starting my new job, and I went from having a steady set schedule, salary, benefits, and before I paint the picture, I just want to admit that the job that I was leaving was far from perfect. In fact, part of the reason of myself deciding was I felt like it wasn't in alignment anymore. It was high demand of working anywhere from 8 to 12-hour shifts. The shift for myself would start midday and run all the way until late evening around, 10 o'clock. And then the commute in itself was incredibly long. And also, it's just, as you probably know, in the hospitality industry, that for me, it feels so unfair, I think is the best word. The expectations are to go above and beyond, to be friendly, to have a smile on your face, to be able to serve people for 8+ hours a day. And then the reward in itself is usually very little. You're, whether you're working for minimum wage and earning your your way through tips, or you're in a management role where you are somewhat being exploited because you're working more than 40 hours a work week and you're only getting paid 40 hours, and the pay that you're getting isn't even, it's livable, but it isn't anything to say that you had the golden handcuffs. So I took a risk, and through networking and building a rapport, I am diving into a new role as an event director. And I think one of the main themes that kept coming up for me that I found to be so fascinating but also debilitating was, so many of us in our minds are constantly thinking like, once I make X amount of money, then my life will be okay. Or once I get this job, or once I date this person, or once I go on this trip. It's always this like, once I achieve this one thing, then I will be happy or content or peaceful or whatever adjective that comes to mind. And I think that that's such a way, I think that that's just so not true, because the reality is, it's like once you get to that destination, now the destination is unfolding, and that will bring about so many more emotions than just joy. Like maybe the initial achievement of doing that brings that joy, but that is such a fleeting thing, and now you're like, oh, I'm in it. Like it almost made me think about, if I had to compare, although I know they're wildly different and I haven't experienced it yet, but like the idea of having a baby or getting pregnant, right? There's so much anticipation and joy and like, wow, I really want this thing. And then when you do get it, you're like, oh, like, and now this journey actually starts. Similar with like a puppy, I can imagine. It's like, oh, they're so cute and squishy, and they're just this pure bundle of joy. But the reality is, like, once you get this puppy or you have this kid, now you're entering a whole new chapter that isn't just like sitting on the beach and enjoying an iced matcha. It's like, oh, it's actually entering a new phase. And so for me, it was like, I often jump into a situation because I feel so deeply that, I'm out of alignment or this isn't working, and those emotions feel so strong. And so I sometimes jump off the cliff per se, and then as I'm falling, I'm like, oh crap, like there's a bunch of thorns on the ground, and I didn't even think about that. I was just thinking about the actual jump. And so, to be honest, I'm currently feeling a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety and a lot of uncertainty, because there is not only learning a new skill set, which can often be very humbling. You are having to ask questions, you're having to have people slow down and really start from the basics, which can feel uncomfortable. You're having to, in a way, slow somebody down and say, hey, I don't understand how to do this, or I've never done this. And although you have to remember that you are fully capable and everyone has started at this space, and you have to be able to advocate for yourself, but also the person that's training you has to slow down and give grace and recognize that, hey, this is all new to me, and once I am trained, like all the things will happen the way they need to, but right now is the time that we just have to slow down and do maybe some of those boring, annoying tasks from the jump. And so that's been uncomfortable to be in. It's also uncomfortable because I'm walking into a space that, although I feel like the organization and the systems that are dialed in are beautiful, but there's also so much uncertainty, because essentially my hours are based on the events. And for example, my last shift that I had, the event that was scheduled for this week, Monday and Tuesday, is no longer on the books. So there goes my hours. So I've been feeling almost, my first initial thought is like, oh crap, like, did I just make the wrong decision? And then the voice in my head is like, no, like, this wasn't irrational. This wasn't something that you just thought of overnight. Like, this is something that you knew for a long time, that you want to get out of this industry and you want to find a job that has the ability to be remote occasionally and gives you flexibility and doesn't just suck up all your soul and energy, so you truly have time to focus on hobbies or focus on passions, focus on creating a podcast, focus on building my community and doing health and fitness and cooking meals and homesteading and all the things that really nourish me in ways that maybe my job doesn't. So I was like, okay, think about that. And this is right now, the universe is like, I'm not giving you 40 hours a week. I'm maybe giving you 25, 30. And there's a part of me that's like, fire the alarms. Like, am I going to have enough money? And am I going to be able to pay for my bills? And like, I'm like getting back into this panic state. And then I'm like, okay, like I don't need to panic because I do have a job right now. So it's not like I'm making zero. And although it's not paying me a lot of money, it's giving me time. And there is the power of potentially manifesting. Like this job has so much potential. But then I think like, okay, is this also really scary because I'm jumping into something that has potential and isn't actually that right now? So now am I getting back into that pattern of like, once I do this, then this will happen. So that has been something that has been incredibly challenging this week. And again, something that I didn't necessarily predict because I was so gung-ho about like, I gotta get a new job. And then you're like, oh crap, I have a new job. And now what? So that kind of takes me on to the next train of thought of, in the moment of feeling, I want to say just so out of control, so afraid, so anxious, so like, what do you do? And I think the best piece of advice I have is to pause. Because when you're in that state of anxiety is when you start to make decisions that maybe could amplify that anxiety. For example, like, okay, I'm really feeling anxious about getting in the car, and then you get in the car and then you get anxious and then you're about to turn, you don't turn, and then boom, there's a car crash, right? Like, that's an extreme example, but that, I think it portrays the reality of like, when you're more anxious, moving quicker isn't going to lead to a better outcome. In fact, that's usually what leads to getting hurt or a mistake or something catastrophic. So I think pause. And I did this yesterday. I paused and I allowed myself to sleep in, which felt incredible. And as I was sleeping in, I was like, wow, this feels incredible. And I was like going through all these thoughts in my head of, okay, well, like, worst case scenario for anything, right, is death. Like, it's just an extreme. That's the fear, right? Like, I want to be alive. I want to create things. I want to make an impact in the community. I want to do all these things. So I'm like, worst case scenario, I die. I was like, okay, that's not going to happen right now. Like, let's say worst case scenario that this job doesn't give me enough hours and now I can't pay my rent. Like, what are you going to do then? And it's like, okay, well, worst case scenario, I can talk to my boss about it. She seems like a very human person. This was another reason why this felt like a good fit, because it wasn't a corporation. It's a lady who has empathy, who has a brain, who's able to talk to you, who you're able to be real with, who also knows the reality of where you're at. So then the other option is like, well, you can potentially start looking for another job. You can reach out to your community and you can go from there. But right now, just take it day by day. So that was one part of it. The other aspect of it was, and is always for me, is community. Like seeking your friends, your family, your neighbors, some other person that is outside of you can be so informative to helping you manage anxiety and coping with the worst case scenario. So yesterday night, we actually went over to a friend's house to celebrate their birthday, and it was very lovely. They cooked dinner for everybody. We sat at the table, and there was 8 of us in total, and it was just so fun to eat together and to chat and to giggle and to be real. And afterwards, my friend has these really cool, they're called tarot cards. It's like a deck of cards, and there's probably like so many different decks out there. And he had, I think, like 4 decks, and there was one deck that I felt really drawn to. And so I grabbed the deck and I sat at the table, and essentially we all pulled a card, and then we went through and read the cards. And this leads me on to my next train of thought, is what has helped me get through the hardest times in life is a sense of spirituality. And this has always been, at least in my mind, it seems very controversial because, you know, there's the idea of religion, and then there's the idea of, but then I think the opposite idea of religion is this whole like woo-woo idea. And I think that for me personally, what has always brought me a sense of peace is recognizing that like there's so much of the world that I can't control, right? Like on the most basic level, if you try to control the weather, you're not. Good luck, but you're probably not going to be able to do it. And so for me, the idea is like, okay, I can't necessarily control all of these elements, but what you can control is your mindset. This leads me to 2 points. Point 1, I want to recommend a book. It is free on Spotify. I've actually read it before, and funny enough, yesterday I put it on Audibles and already was like, my skull is cracking. Holy crap. It's called The Untethered Soul, The Journey Beyond Yourself. Let me say it one more time. The Untethered Soul, The Journey Beyond Yourself. And the author is Michael A. Singer. And essentially what I'm talking about is exactly how the book begins. It talks about the story of if you're with yourself right now and you hear a voice in your head, whether it be positive or negative, you hear it. For example, if you're with yourself right now and you say hello inside of your head, you hear a voice. But what's crazy is like you don't hear a hello back, you just hear your voice. And you can start to say it a million times, or you can even start to shout like hello, and you will hear that voice. And that voice is something that we all have inside of your head. And interestingly enough, that voice is what controls your reality. For example, what I think a lot of us struggle with, self-esteem, self-worth. Oftentimes, whether you're conscious or unconscious about it, there is a voice happening inside your head. For example, if I was being this negative voice in my head, it's like I could wake up and the first thing I do is look in the mirror and like, oh gosh, like I have another big pimple on my head, on my forehead. And then it's like you go and you start brushing your teeth and you're just like, oh, like I'm so tired and I just like really don't want to go to work. And then I go outside and I'm just like, oh, like it's gray and it's gloomy again. Like this is all the chatter that's happening, and it's happening 24/7. And so there's this whole idea that if you can somehow be aware of this chatter and allow this chatter to happen, but not have it control you, then we get to this idea of creativity, of manifestation, of peace, of happiness, all of these concepts. And to tie it back to my other point of having dinner at a friend's house, we're all pulling a card, and the first card that I pull is a card, and it's called Trust. And it's this beautiful picture of this human who essentially is falling and they're in pieces, and they reach their hand out and there's like another hand that's like grabbing their hand. And it kind of reminded me of like in my own experience, this idea of there's a part of my brain that's like, listen, like you're on the right path. Things are unfolding exactly the way they're meant to unfold. This is what you wanted. And then there's this other half of my brain that's like, you know, things are super unknown, and like, what if I'm not going to have enough money and I'm going to be back in the same space, and like all these negative things. And so when I read the card, essentially the card was like reminding you that everything is working for you. Like everything is happening for a reason. And I know that oftentimes when you hear those things, or when I think about like spirituality, like it sounds good when things are going well, and then you're just like, get that crap out of my face when things aren't going right. Like for example, here's a good one. Like my partner, about 6 weeks ago, got on a call at work, and essentially that was his last call. His boss said, hey, look, like unfortunately we're gonna have to part ways. I don't think this is a good fit anymore, and I'm gonna grab my computer in about 2 hours. And it was like, whoa. Like the initial thought is like, I can't believe I got fired. Like these were his thoughts. Like, I can't believe I got fired. I've never been fired before. Like, what am I gonna do? Like, you just start to get into this panic. And then you take a step back and you're like, wait a minute. He's like, first off, he really hated his job that he was doing. Like, the people he was working with were not his people. The job in itself was very uninspiring. He was stuck in a pattern where it was like, wake up, go straight on the computer, do my work for 8 hours, and it was just very soul-sucking. But the reality was it was paying his bills. Like, it was a job, right? And I was like, you know what? This is a good thing. He has known for a while, similar to me, like, this isn't a good fit. And sometimes we get the ability that we get to control when we make that call. For example, like, I knew my job wasn't a good fit, so I, in my own accord, was like, today's my last day. That's beautiful. But for him, the universe was like, listen, I know you. You ain't gonna do that. You're probably gonna wait another 6 months and be miserable, and who knows in that time what else could happen. But like, I'm gonna force you. I'm gonna force you to get out of your comfort zone. I'm gonna force you to change. And so of course in that moment you're like, what the heck? Like, why is this happening to me? Like, and it's so easy to take those things personal, right? It's easy to be like, oh, I got fired because, I wasn't good enough, or I didn't follow the rules, or I wasn't smart enough, or whatever. And like, all of those things aren't actually true, because you can say that, but on the other spectrum, you could say, what if I got fired because I was too powerful and I had too much of a voice and I'm actually overly qualified? What if I got fired because my own boss knew that I wasn't happy here? And if I'm not happy, how am I going to create a good morale? So it's interesting that depending on your mindset, you have the ability to change the perspective in a way that allows you to feel empowered and allows you to be like, wait a second, this is happening. So this goes back to this chat about spirituality and how I think that the universe is working for you when you're in a space that you are being conscious. Because I don't necessarily think the universe is working for you when you're in an anxious, reactive space. Now you are just essentially being reactive, and within that you don't necessarily have the powers to then create what you want. So I think that there's so much beauty in pausing, thinking, journaling, beginning to really think about, like, what are the thoughts that are happening in my head? Not as I'm controlling them, but as they're just flowing in. Like, what am I thinking when I look out the window? Am I in awe, or do I feel a sense of uncomfortability or disgust, or am I looking at all the things that are negative, right? That's like another good way that I've heard is like, if you really want to know what's happening within your mind, go outside, go for a walk, see how you're feeling about other people. Are you noticing, like, oh gosh, like, look how greasy her hair is, or like, look how her clothes look? Because I can bet you, if that's what you're thinking about her, that's actually not her. That's actually what you're thinking about yourself. So the ability to become aware of that then gives you the power and the ability to be like, well, wait a second, let's flip the script. And rather, that saying where they're like, you are your worst enemy, which I'm like, can we talk about how controlling and terrible that saying is? Like, if we actually were our like biggest hype men, biggest like, yo, I got this, I'm confident, I can do whatever I want, like imagine how much life you would be able to create, to enjoy, to make, to experience. Like just think about that. Cause I'm slowly getting on that. And let me say, it's not something that happens overnight. So if you see it happening and you're getting frustrated, that's not the answer. It's a over time, just like it's taken us over time to get to the point of certain patterns and certain behavioral things that are usually stemmed from somewhere down in childhood, a sense of trauma that you had to protect yourself, and now the thing that once protected you is actually the thing that's hindering you. And this is why this is like a forever going personal journey where you never really come to a point of like, look at me, I'm just fully the best in anything I do, and I never deal with self-worth or confidence or anything. It's just like life is great. That's unfortunately just not the way the brain is wired, which ultimately in a way like kind of makes us on a fair playing field for everybody. Even the people that you think are at the top, they probably still have their days of fear and doubt because it's normal and that's okay. But when that pops up, the practice is not to get upset or to aggravate it because that's just furthering, perpetuating the problem. The practice is to pause and to think, how can I, in this moment, give myself grace? How can I, in this moment, be nice to myself? What can I do that is coming from a place of love? And something that has helped me in that, and that has been so powerful, is having a beautiful partner. And in those moments, I think to myself, what would my Bubba do for me? And some of those things would be like, he would sit down and he would make you an incredible meal. And then I sit down and I make a meal and I'm like, whoa, I actually don't feel as anxious. And I feel a little more alert and present to then go make decisions. Or he would tell me to sit down and to be quiet and maybe enjoy watching a YouTube video. And I'm like, whoa, I feel a little less stressed. And now I can make a decision. So those are some good examples of coming from a place of self-love, respect, and humanity. We don't need to further punish ourselves. We need to further give ourselves grace. And when I say that, that doesn't mean take it to the extreme of like, oh, I'm going to give myself grace. That means I don't have to do anything I don't want to do, because that's not being an adult. That is also perpetuating a problem, which is on a whole other topic. So yeah, I got that trust card and it was just a reminder of like, I'm on the right path. Things are a little bit uncomfortable, but I hope that together we got this. And let's continue on this journey. And if you're afraid of something, I hear you. I see you. In fact, I'm really afraid to post this podcast online. And on the surface, I'm like, it's really not that bad. Just like do it, right? But then there's just like something deep down in the pits of my stomach that I almost can't even get the words to say, which is quite interesting because I tend to always have words to say. But there's something deep down, and I think it is a whole lot of fear. But at the same time, the excitement and the joy and the possibilities of what if is starting to overcome that fear. So I just want to leave on a positive note and say thank you for listening. I hope that this helped you in some way. And until next week, friends.